Okay, Perek Revi'i. Machlas ha'atzlus v'hisrapus utrufason. Laziness, lethargy, and how to cure them. Okay, so we got done talking about the pleading that we had to the main spiritual maladies and their cures of trying to convince the next generation of Yidden what Hashem wants, and don't refuse the beauty of Torah, and don't refuse the beauty of the neshama becoming something bigger, and that the Sitra Achra doesn't have anything for us on the other side. And what we're going to talk tonight is one of the main calamities of people, of nations, and that is the inability to make change because you are weighed down by earth, as we'll talk about in spiritual ways, earth, wind, fire, and water, and where laziness comes from, and being able to channel the taiva to find ourselves not working on ourselves in ways that we so desperately want to work on ourselves on, but we talk about it, we think about it, we converse about it, we do more pondering about it, but we don't do anything about it. So today we'll talk a little bit about the Piazetzner's guide to Talmidim and to all of us on laziness, lethargy, and how to cure them. So here we go, page 89 in the Feldheim Chovas Hatalmidim. Laziness is probably the most harmful and most widespread spiritual ailment among young people. However, like any other fault, it varies from one young person to another. Well, dare I say that this hasn't changed. One youngster might be completely lazy. He likes to sleep a lot and do nothing. Any type of exertion is an effect. I can't even read the word, but it's difficult for him. He has excuses for everything. As the pasuk says, a lazy person says, there is a lion along the way, a lion in the streets. He will forever be a tzaddik in his own eyes because he is full of excuses. He will always find fault with those who work on themselves and are greater than he in order to justify his own lack of effort. How many times have I been made fun of by tons of people, mostly friends who love me, regarding all this Avodah Salev stuff, the inability to stay consistent with certain avodas, but trying to do the best I can, the inability to connect deeply to a specific avoda, and but try to ponder it and talk about it and try to get there. So there has to be this effort that we take, regardless of our outside audiences, to try to make change, because ultimately we'll get it. And we see that in so many of Klal Yisrael that is fighting for that difference that they want to make in their lives and in the lives of others, which we're one nation, Am Yisrael Chai Mamish. And even if he does occasionally decide to reform and exert himself, he tires out very quickly. He manages to learn well for a mere week or two from the beginning of the winter or summer's month, and that's it. If you chas v'shalom have this terrible midah within you, please uproot it quickly. Eradicate it from your core. It is repulsive and shameful, and it rots, destroys everything. Those of you who are lazy, please tell me, why are you better than the whole world? The sun and the moon do their jobs without ever taking a break. The earth is plowed, harrowed, and seeded, and in turn gives it strength and vigor to produce that which Hashem commanded it to yield. Oxen, horses, and all other animals work with all of their strength. It is only those harmful creatures and predatory animals that idle their days away, desiring only to prey upon and devour each other. Why should you be idle like them? And here's the plea. Re'ena, look, even Chazal spurred themselves on and took advantage of the opportunity to learn lessons from the world around them, despite all the great work they did with Mesiras Nefesh. Rabbi Eliezer was always the first to reach the base medrash and the last to leave. Nevertheless, he once saw that those who took out the manure and fodder and the field hands were all up before he was, and he immediately chastised himself and said, they arise so early for their mundane jobs, and I, who am involved in Hashem's holy work, how could I have been late today? Indeed, take a good look at yourself. The construction workers with full dedication all day long on top of perilously tall buildings, the farmers sweat out outside their fields, and how about your own father? How much effort and toil does he expend providing a livelihood for you as well? Everyone works. Some work using their mental energies, others with their physical capabilities, but all of them work themselves to the bone. And you're walking around all day doing nothing? Why should the heavens and earth curse you by saying, look, we have all of our offspring are performing our duties as Hashem our God and our Master commanded us and created us. We are all working while these lazy youngster lords himself over us by wasting his time. But even if you personally haven't been stricken with this terrible disease of laziness and your body and soul haven't been contaminated with the germ of idleness, you still aren't absolved of the need to seek and cleanse yourself of the lesser form of laziness, which is lethargy. Even if it's not quite as dangerous as laziness, still, if it takes hold of a person, it can prevent him from realizing his potential, and it can stand in the way of the following of the path that leads to Hashem. Please remember that the Torah was given from heaven, and to be a Jew who learns Torah and serves Hashem means spiritually ascending to a connection with God Himself. The only way to reach this goal is through work, determination, and maximum utilization of all one's emotional and physical capabilities. So here's something to consider. We only have so much to give every day. Where is our energy bank being spent? For most, it's being spent on what the Piazetzner would consider to be mundane. The work of the fields in our own world today. The work of the computers, the work of the office, the work of the sales meetings, the work of the clients meetings, the work of the networking, the work of the strategizing, the work of trying to find different ways to make income, different ways to support our families, which is holy work and can be very holy work. But we only have so much energy to give each of those things we need to do. So the Vart may not be, don't do the work. Just learn most of the day and leave the rest up to Hashem. If you're holding there, you should do it. But if you're not holding there, the Torah says you shouldn't behave that way. You should do what the normal, regular Shabbos is. So what's the Vart? How are you showing up? Are you showing up stressed, angry, anxious, aggressive, hungry for money, hungry for power, hungry for covet that drains you? Or are you showing up as a Baal Bitachon would show up? I'm good with whatever happens. I'm here because I have to do this. It's got zero to do with what's going to end up in my bank account. And I'm just here to make a Kiddush Hashem, and I'm here to do the next right thing, which is strategizing. And so I have a business, and in my business, I know pretty much what I have to do every day to continue to try to grow it, and we have to change and grow and make strategies, and we have to do all that. That's what we do. The question for me came up is, what if I want to open up other lines of service? Is that over hishtadlusing? So based on where I'm holding, it's not about over hishtadlusing, but the shaila I was told to ask myself is, what is it going to do to your learning of menuchas hanefesh if you open those? What's it going to do? And so for me, I have to assess that. The question is, am I brave enough to walk away from one of those opportunities, knowing that none of those have any impact on my income, because I know Hashem's going to give me whatever I need? And I don't know that answer. But I do know that when I decide to show up and wear work like a loose garment, just, it's hanging off of me, it's light, it's comfortable, versus buttoned up, super tight, just holding on for dear life, white knuckling, forcing, obsessing. I don't have the energy. There's a very big difference between the Avishai Lev that wakes up and goes to his chavrusa in the morning before work and is putting his energy into that, knowing that he's not even thinking about work because he's in a good headspace, versus the opposite, which is most days. Going there and doing the work and pushing myself to learn, but really, really, really I'm not okay inside. And so many of us are not okay inside. And I'm seeing that more and more. There are fractures in the system today, on a system that has, in the frum world, tremendous wealth and tremendous success. But the fractures are starting to hit that second or third generation, because they may not be able to do the same things as the first generation was able to do, and they're suffering because they had seen success being given in a material way and the hard work put in to get there. And they tied those two things together, and now they're in a situation where they're my age or younger, and they're completely lost. And they're getting through life via distraction. They're getting through life, being supported, or whatever that may look like. But it's very, very different than any sort of wholesome fulfillment of life and what they're doing. And as we talk about laziness or lethargy or any of those midos, a lot of times they come from the place of like, what's the point? And we very, very much want to make sure that we're connected to the point. And you can only show up for the point and get the things done for the point, which is ultimately dveikus and connection to our higher power, when you have the energy to do so. And if you're draining the energy in your 9 to 5 or longer, you're not going to be able to invest it in becoming the person that we want to be, which is what the Piazetzner is saying. The amount of effort expanded in acquiring something is proportionate to the worth of that which is being acquired. Kol havod lefi erech hadavar hanikna nimdedes devarim zoylim ushetusim kimat b'li avoda nikanim midvarim yikarim mehem. Wow. The amount of effort expended in acquiring something is proportionate to the worth of that which is being acquired. What's worth it? What's worth it? What do we put worth on? Vacations, houses, cars, clothes. I mean, yeah. That's how we've been trained in capitalist America. It's very different when you see from people in Israel. You know, the reason why their value system is better is because some of that stuff was just never important culturally. It's the same button-down shirt and khaki pants and sandals, and away we go. There's an envy to that, and also a very hard adoption to that for an American person. You see that all the time when they make Aliyah, for some younger generation people making Aliyah. It's just the comforts are not there, the conveniences aren't there, it's hard. But there's a sense of joy and happiness that if you look at any of the scales of ratings that these companies do out there to measure the most happiest places in the world, Israel's always in the mix for a top spot. And so are other countries that are even more third world than that, and Israel's very far from third world today, but at one point it didn't have a lot of the things. So we know the answers, but we're surrounded by it. So how do we pull ourselves out of that in the world that we're living in today? For example, objects that are inexpensive or relatively meaningless can be acquired almost effortlessly, while the more expensive items require a greater degree of exertion. It follows then that learning Torah and dwelling in Hashem's holy presence can only be acquired through a tremendous amount of work. It follows that then learning Torah and dwelling in Hashem's holy presence can only be acquired through a tremendous amount of work. This work, however, is not beyond a human being's capabilities. Hashem Yisbarach didn't entrust us with the task that is beyond our strengths and abilities. We simply need to apply ourselves and to put in the necessary effort so that we won't be people who serve Hashem only when the mitzvah happens their way. Rather, we will become constant servants of Hashem without slacking off or becoming casual about our mission. It has to be our mission, though. I just said in the other Chabura, maybe it's as simple as just remembering that that's our mission throughout the day. And that by the time you start your day and leave your day, and then you go home and deal with life at home, you just forget. You know, on the wall here I have paintings I got made. It's Lubavitch Rebbe, the Ribnitzer, Rav Moshe Weinberger, Rav Tamar from Bilvavi Mishkanevna, and Rav Kook. And every one of those people live for Hashem. Or did live for Hashem. In the biggest way. And I promise they were all happier than Avishai Lev ever has been happy. And maybe it's just because I forget. Maybe it's because we forget. I can only speak about myself, but maybe it's because I just don't remember throughout the day, you know? And we really want to get to a place of being able to remember. And setting reminders, which Bavavi talks about. This work, however, is not beyond human, as we said. We simply need to apply ourselves and to put the necessary effort without slacking. King Shlomo said that one that slacks off in his work is also a brother to the master of destruction. A lazy person has absolutely no desire to work, and he is the master of destruction. One who is lethargic, however, functions when there is some function to be accomplished, but essentially is not an achiever. He sleeps on the job, drags it out unnecessarily, is interested only in accomplishing things superficially, and invests neither effort nor thoroughness to what he does. A conscientious person, however, is the one whose essence is that of an achiever. He seeks out the task because he is incapable of remaining idle. When circumstances are such that he has to spend a few hours, not to mention an entire day, without something to accomplish, he is deeply dissatisfied with himself and regards himself with disgust. Work invigorates him and gives him pleasure. He is discontented with simple tasks, and superficiality leaves his ambitious soul unfulfilled. He is quick, happy, and thorough worker. Like a waterhouse that, when interrupted midstream, flows even more furiously in an effort to overcome the barrier in its way. So the conscientious person rises to the occasion when obstacles are placed in his path, and it is only strengthened in his resolve to continue to achieve and overcome. Still, although the malady of laziness is worse than the one of lethargy, it is harder to cure one who is lethargic than one who is lazy. In other words, if a young person who is lazy wants to change, he has more means to uproot his laziness than a lethargic person has to get rid of his lethargy. As long as he is in yeshiva, both his father and his teacher will give him work to do. He will be obligated to awaken early and arrive at yeshiva on time. He will have to learn a certain amount according to a specific timetable, for example, each week, and as a result there is at least the possibility that he will get used to not being lazy when he grows older. Lethargy, however, is a different story. Whether one is lethargic by nature, or whether he was at first lazy but succeeded in uprooting his laziness to the point that only lethargy remains, it will be very hard to absolve himself of this trait. This is because even when he wakes up early or while he is working at the task at hand, he does everything, be it learning or some other aspect of Avodas Hashem. Lethargically and superficially, when he wants to rid himself of a negative character trait, he will not be particular to uproot it entirely and fix it completely when davening, or will not expend the effort to concentrate properly on the meaning of the words, because superficiality and the easy way out are what he wants. It is far more comfortable to let his mind be preoccupied with nonsense and to mentally and emotionally exert himself to concentrate on what he is saying before the master of the world. I don't know about laziness or lethargic, personalities. Obviously they exist. I don't see a ton of it, I feel like, in Ruchnius today, in Yiddishkeit today. I feel like we've got a lot of hungry Yidden working really hard. At least I see that in healthcare. They're really, they're grinding and trying to fight and win and become wealthy, and there's so many people of wealth today that it seems very attainable for guys and gals who are looking for that. But I do see the imbalance in myself, and I'm sure in others as well, that you can't give all of yourself to the work and expect to be able to give any sort of fair amount to the Ruchnius. What a world, man. What a world it could be if someone's able to tip the scales in the other direction. And that, they don't have to say to themselves, when I make it, I'll be able to learn more. When I do this, it's always that and it's never that. It's always that excuse, and it never ends up being that, usually, unless you're already doing it. You don't see the guys sitting and learning when they retire who weren't sitting and learning when they were working. They'll go to a shiur, they'll partake, of course, but the learners, the connected people to Torah in a way that they feel it, that's what they are. They were always learning guys who went to work. There's some guys in the Kollel, Avi Banker, great Chicago example. David Schnell, great Chicago example. There's many more. These are guys who are learners who happen to have to go to work at some point. I don't know if they're still working, but there's just a difference in they're Yidden who go to work versus workers who happen to be Yidden, which is definitely the camp that this guy falls into at this point. But I so desperately look up to the ones who can change that narrative and become the learners who want to work. Okay, so again, Chovas Hatalmidim. It's Chovas all of us. It's not just the Talmidim. We're all Talmidim. And b'siyata d'shmaya, we should have a beautiful lichtig Chanukah. We'll pick up after Chanukah, Mirz Hashem, and we should see the R and feel the R and be able to take the R with us through the winter, and continue to try to find ways to tip the scales and to ensure that we are investing our energy and our time and our focus and our mental state and our tamimos and our consciousness into the things that are going to bring us true peace and true joy, And with Siyata Deshmaya, Hashem will intervene and continue to help us. Okay, have a very good night.